Welcome to the San Francisco Chronicles webinar, What You Need to Know About the Great Wealth Transfer. I am Sarah Fehlberg. I'm the editor of Emerging Product here at the Chronicle, and we've got a great conversation in store for you today. Before we get started, I want to go over a couple quick things about what you can expect in the next hour. I'm sure most of you are here because you've read personal finance columnist Jessica Roy's terrific series on the Great Wealth Transfer. But if you've missed any of those stories, you can find links to them in the resources section at the bottom of your screen. A couple of you have asked about the session and if it's being recorded. It is. If you miss anything or if you want to re-watch anything, it will be available after the event ends and it will be sent right to your inbox. We're also going to take your questions. Please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen to post your questions. We probably will not get to all of them, but we'll take as many as we can. And one quick ask on that, try to make your questions relevant to a wider audience. We've got over 300 people here so far, and I'm sure more joining. So try to make your questions relevant to other people as well. And please don't share any overly revealing personal details. Okay. Before we get started, I just want to thank all of our panelists for being so generous with their time and expertise. We are so excited to hear from all of you. And I want to thank our sponsor, Sequoia Living, for their support of this session. And I want to thank all of you attendees. You are subscribers, and we couldn't do this without your support. Thank you for attending and supporting local news. I'm going to kick it over to Jessica Roy in just a second after a quick message from our sponsor, Sequoia Living. Thank you so much. Enjoy the webinar. Jessica, take it away.
Awesome. Well, great. Thank you all so much to all of you for being here. I really, really appreciate it. As you know, I'm the personal finance columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle, and earlier this month, I published a 3-part series about how the Great Wealth Transfer is going to play out in the Bay Area. And tonight, or rather this afternoon, I'm so excited to have 3 of the people that I spoke to for this series here to answer more of your questions. As Sarah said, you can put questions in the chat at any time. We're going to have sort of a main conversation here, and then at the end, we're going to take some of your questions. I assume that everybody who's joining our webinar has read the series, but a super quick recap, if not, basically, a lot of wealth is going to change hands in the Bay Area over the next 20 years. It's not going to be as simple as changing names on a bank account, because for many Bay Area families, the bulk of their net worth comes from their home. And that means a lot of complicated decisions have to be made about how to pass it down to heirs and about long-term care costs. Today, we are joined again by speakers who weighed in for this series to talk a little bit more about these challenges. We have Mark Gilfix, an estate planning and elder law attorney. We have Robin Patan, a wealth manager for Corio Advisors, who also shared her insights on her experience settling her parents' estate while navigating challenging family relationships. And we have Chris High, the founder and CEO of Wealth Care Solutions and a fellow at the LIMRA Retirement Income Institute, who studies the intersection of longevity and personal finance, and who also shared his experience about having his mother in full-time memory care in the final years of her life. And our speakers today all live here in the Bay Area. One more thing before we begin, we cannot answer really highly specific personal questions. And again, please don't put that kind of information in the chat. We are also not giving investment advice. We are not giving legal advice. So go forth with that information. All right, so thank you again to all of my speakers for being here today. Let's talk about setting up your estate to be inherited. So to start reporting this story, I put out a survey to Chronicle readers, to some of the subscribers who are here today, saying, what are you worried about with the Great Wealth Transfer? What do you anticipate happening, and what sort of anxieties do you have? And something that came up a ton was, I don't know how my kids are going to split this up and settle it and still be speaking to each other at the end, or I don't know what plan my parents have, and I don't know how my siblings and I are going to sort this out. One of the people that I spoke to for this story, Peter Compier, said that with his 6 kids, he and his wife had gone back and forth about, do we do a trust? Do we have one person kind of doling the money out? And they landed on like, we're just going to split it 6 ways evenly. He said, it's just a mess. There's no fairness about it. No matter what anybody does, people are going to lose. People are going to resent it. There's going to be a disagreement. Mark, you told me that sibling battles over these estates can cost 6 or 7 figures, and quote, the only ones who really win are the lawyers. What do you advise clients who are anxious about how their kids will handle their estate?
Well, thank you for having me here today. And it's not freezing. So yes, we deal with this all the time. Our firm's been around for 40 years. We've seen pretty much every situation. And I think one, having a plan, like not having a plan is a plan, right? It's a choice to kind of welcome uncertainty and potentially chaos. So having an estate plan is really key. And that's a living trust, powers of attorney, advance directive for any individual. But I think communicating with your family is the best. If not all families have relationships where that's possible, I totally get that. Sometimes there's strained relationships with one kid or another, but sunlight is the best disinfectant. We just find time and time again, the biggest fights come from when there's a surprise. And especially when you have surprise meets a feeling of economic uncertainty or need from one child who feels like they need it more, that leads to relationships. I mean, just last week I talked to siblings who were great friends for decades. Parent passed away. There's stress over the finances, there's stress over who's getting the house, and all of a sudden they don't talk to each other. So communicating ahead of time, and mom and dad, is better if you can be sort of the bad guys and lay out what you're doing and why, than leaving it up to the kids to hash it out later, not knowing why the plan is the way it is. So communication and having a plan ahead of time is the best way. You can't always hold off fights. You can't always prevent them. But do what you can, control what you can control. And so having a plan, communicating as best you can ahead of time is the key.
Well, I think that's a great point about then if you are the parents in this situation, you have your lawyer or your financial advisor to turn back to be like, well, they advise this. I know that's called like borrowing authority. Well, they say the best way. And then sometimes maybe that way can diffuse some of the more uncomfortable elements. Robin, I'm curious from wealth management perspective, how do you help your clients prepare for this aspect of financial planning? I mean, do most people seem to default to like, we want to split everything evenly? And is that kind of always the right call?
Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And it's really a conversation that should happen decades before death or decades before incapacitation. This should not be a deathbed conversation by any means. As a financial advisor, I like to know the family. And, one of the benefits of having a relationship with a financial advisor is we know the family dysfunction. We know, who's going to be problematic, who's going to be fine, how the client is thinking about structuring things. And I always say, blame me. Like if you want to talk to your kids about your estate, put it off on me. Say that your financial advisor told you to have this conversation. Let me take the heat. So sometimes I'm a deflection from family dysfunction and that they put it off on me. The financial advisor told me to do X, Y, and Z, and people really like that. And I'm okay being the devil in the story if it means it takes the heat off the family or the parents or the siblings.
And then, in the story you talked about, now you are settling your mom's estate. How did your years of helping other people navigate this inform how you went into this process for yourself?
Knowing the process and actually doing the process with your own family are just two different things. I knew what to do from the very beginning, but because of my own family dynamics, it was very difficult. And, my parents had a will dating back to 2006, 2007, but I knew like a power of attorney that was 20 plus years old would not be recognized. And we needed to redo all of that paperwork. And it was difficult because my mom was not cooperative with the process. She wanted to back out of the process. And I knew how my mom operates. I was like, fine, okay, you can back out of the process if you want. And eventually, because I didn't fight her, she came around. And, she put up some resistance when the mobile notary came, but we got past it. We got the paperwork signed and we got it done. It's knowing is one thing, doing is another, especially when it comes to your own family. And I just say this is a conversation that should happen decades before. Decades before.
Well, and I think that touches on another anxiety that people brought up a lot, which was like, I don't know what my parents' plan is. I don't know how to talk to my parents about their plan. My parents are like, you'll just sort it out after we're gone. How do you, I mean, this is for both Mark and Robin. I mean, can you march your parents to an attorney's office? Can you pay for an attorney or financial advisor for them? How do you broach this topic with your parents in a productive way that isn't like, I'm waiting for you to die and then I want to know, what my handout is going to look like?
All right.
Well, I think, oh, go ahead, Robin.
I'm sorry. It's a little bit different for me because my parents know that I'm a financial advisor. So I was able to find the estate attorney, design it for them with the estate attorney and say, look, this is what we're designing. This is what I think is best. And my parents, of course, know, like, and trusted me, so they were able to sign it. If I didn't have the professional background that I have, I think it would have been much more complicated.
Yeah, and I think one thing to remember, if you're the adult child, if there's no plan in place, you're going to be the one dealing with the mess and the expenses. So there's an incentive. You can pay for your parents to do the plan, by the way, as long as they're the client. So it's fine with us. If a kid wants to pay for the plan, as long as the kid knows that the parent is our client, that's okay. But I'd say to start the conversation, start with positivity. Don't start with, hey, you're going to die one of these days. I want to know what I'm going to get or how it's going to happen. So it should be more, and this relates to long-term care too, and those costs. It's like, what are your hopes and dreams for your legacy? What do you want as you get older and as you have higher needs? What do you want in place? And I want to make sure that I can help you that way. So we need to have a plan in place. And we lawyers can also be the bad guys in a way. Like, hey, if you did your own plan with a lawyer, say, hey, I'm talking to my own estate planning lawyer. They were asking about if my parents have that. You need this, and you can meet with my lawyer or you can meet with someone else. So I think start with positivity and know that as the adult child, you're going to be the one left holding the bag. And if the plan's not in place, both while your parents are older, if they become incapacitated, and after they pass away, because if you don't have documents like power of attorney, advance directive, you might not have the ability to even communicate with their doctors unless they give you that authority, or talk to banks, or deal with their financial advisor. So having that talk ahead of time, lead with positivity, hopes, dreams, concerns. How can I help you with this? So I think that lead with positivity rather than when do I get my money?
Oh, I like that. Lead with positivity. I think that's a good way to look at it. In California, obviously we have Prop 13 and Prop 19, which shape so many of these decisions. Mark, what questions do you hear from clients about this, and what advice do you find yourself giving about dealing with those?
Yeah, so Prop 19, we do some social media videos on YouTube and stuff, and those are our videos that have gotten the most views by far, because I don't think people really understand Prop 19. Here's a quick primer. So old law, we have Prop 13 California. As long as you own your house, property tax can only go up by 2% per year, unless you add on to your house or something like that. So a lot of people who've lived in the Bay Area for decades have very low property taxes compared to the value of their home. That's an amazing thing. It lets people stay in the area. Prop 58 used to be a lot. It used to let parents pass their primary residence and some other properties to their kids without an increase in property taxes. So a lot of people think that's still the law. It is not. Prop 19 is now law, which allows only limited protections from reassessment and only for the primary residence. So if you have a rental property, it's going to get reassessed. Now, we lawyers have some strategies to avoid that, but it takes a lot of work. So for your primary residence, though, there's a limited exception of $1 million of fair market values protected from reassessment if and only if a house is mom and dad's primary residence, and if a kid who inherits it makes it their primary residence, ideally within 1 year. So if you have a house in the Peninsula or Marin or parts of San Francisco, $1 million in protection from reassessment might still mean a $20,000 a year increase in property taxes. So it really complicates the idea of, if you want to hold on to the family home, just thinking about, hey, well, so I want my home to go to my kids. They can figure out later. Well, you have to take into account that property taxes could skyrocket. So it just goes into, does it make sense to even favor one kid in inheriting the home versus other assets? And just knowing that this is the law. It may be a lot harder to stay in the Bay Area than you might have thought. And for rental properties, a lot harder to hold on to those. So I think there's a lot of ignorance about that. You have to be aware there are some solutions out there when you work with lawyers, but you at least need to know your kids need to have, if they can't afford the increased property taxes, it may not make sense to worry about preserving the home for the next generation, frankly. But being aware of that and maybe thinking about your estate plan a little bit differently, and just taking that into account.
And then, Robin, I know you talked about dealing with navigating a challenging relationship with your sister. For people who are going into this with not the best relationship with their siblings, what tips do you have for people? What can they do to address this in like a constructive way?
I think having parents communicate what their intentions are really help. I let my father communicate with my sister what he wants, and so there's no ambiguity about it. And it's having parents who are willing to communicate and willing to stand up and say, I designed it this way because of X, Y, Z. I wanted Robin to do this or have this or be this because of X, Y, and Z. And doing it while the person is alive. I recently came back. I came back a few days ago from my dad, and there's some artwork. There's some posters that are very valuable. And I told my dad, can you please communicate to my sister that these two posters are my personal property and were not ever owned by you and your mother or and my, mom, so that in case something does happen, she understands why I'm taking these two pieces, these two very valuable pieces to California because they are mine. So if you have a parent who's willing to openly communicate, it makes things infinitely easier.
I think that's great advice. When I first started working on this series, I had really hoped, what I always hope to do with my job is like come up with the right answer and be like, guess what? Here's how to settle your estate perfectly, no fighting, exact direct thing you need. And it turns out that's pretty complicated. The other thing I had hoped to solve was what is the exact number you need to save up to be like, I've got long-term care covered, no problem. And it turns out it's a very complicated question with, unfortunately, again, not an easy answer. Chris, when you and I first spoke, you said a lot of financial planners, help you plan your retirement portfolio and finances around market fluctuations and tariffs and taxes and all this other stuff, but don't focus on the healthcare risk. What is that risk? And should people be proactively bringing this up with their financial planner?
Yes, absolutely. Most of us are living longer than our parents or grandparents. And that's kind of the good news and the bad news. Obviously, it's great to live longer, but living longer, especially in the United States, where we have sort of a limited welfare state, living longer can be very expensive. And the big reason why it's expensive is because of both healthcare costs and long-term care costs. So healthcare costs are things like, your health insurance, your medications, surgeries, those kinds of things. And there are many organizations now that try to estimate that. And those numbers are usually, $200,000, $300,000 per person in retirement. So an average 65-year-old is going to end up spending $200,000, $300,000 just on healthcare. Again, doctor's appointments, surgeries, medications. And then there's long-term care, which is something different. And then healthcare, some of those costs are covered by insurance. Long-term care, unless you have long-term care insurance, it's not likely to be covered by Medicare or your health insurance. And so long-term care, when think about long-term care, think about, assisted living facility or perhaps getting in-home care. It's for people who need help with what's called activities of daily living. And most of us are going to see that have already seen that in their parents or grandparents. And so even those costs, on top of those healthcare costs, those costs can be also quite prohibitive. Roughly about 70% of adults in the US are going to need at least 3 years of long-term care. And, my mother was in a memory unit because she had dementia. And this was a few years ago, and that was around $10,000 a month. I'm sure it's probably more now. But so most assisted living facilities, especially in the Bay Area, they're going to run you, $6, $7, $8,000 a month.
I had somebody, this woman who runs a platform called Water Lily that lets people set up like personalized estimates for long-term care planning. Yeah, from the story, it was like, I see my numbers here. Yeah, 3 years in an assisted living facility, it's going to be like $323,000. Skilled nursing,
Yeah.
$500,000, and for 3 years of like full-time, round-the-clock in-home care, close to $1 million. The typical cost
Yeah.
in the Bay Area.
And that's one thing that's many people don't quite understand is that a lot of people want to live in their home, they want to age in place, and that's great. But the fact is that's usually more expensive than moving to assisted living facility.
Well,
Because if you're talking,
Chris, that was something
Yeah.
you and I talked about. Yeah, that people, it starts with, well, I just need an extra few hours of home care a week, and that is a lot less expensive than full-time, skilled nursing or assisted living. But you talked about, and this didn't make it into the story, but you said you have a friend who wound up, his parents were spending, I think it was $35,000 a month
yeah,
on in-home
That's
care
right.
because it spirals so quickly and you need
yeah,
help
and
with everything.
she needed help with everything, and she wanted to live in her house, and that included making all the the payments on the house. And then she was having some cognitive. She was very old in her 90s, having some cognitive issues. So once you start to veer in that direction of having issues, dementia or mild cognitive impairment, that's when you really start needing 24/7 care. So if you just do the math, 24 times 40, that's $1,000. We're talking $1,000 a day, and that's roughly what my friend was spending, between all that and getting someone in to do the cleaning. So it can frequently be more to spend time in your home, and usually spending time in your home also means more coordination with family members and more a bigger time commitment with family members, because you not always, but it usually means family members, they've got to coordinate all these care services, and they got to make sure the bills get paid. So that's not even part of those overall costs. So again, so these are the kind of things, again, if you add the long-term care costs to the healthcare costs, you're talking potentially hundreds of thousands, or at least many thousands, hundreds of $1,000s a year. And if you're a healthy 65-year-old, you might live for another 20 years. And those last, the other the issue is that a lot of people they might live till 90, but they stop living, sort of being really healthy, say when in their early to mid 80s. They call that health span. So that's the length of time that you're healthy. So you may live to 90, but you really, for the last 5 or 10 years, you may need a lot of help. And so those costs can really be prohibitive. And I think everything that Mark and Robin have been talking about, of being prepared early, is super important. And it also it applies to this domain as well.
Well, yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about next, Robin and Mark. Yeah, how do you help people plan for this element of their lives? Robin, we can start with you. Is there an answer here? Is it long-term care insurance? Is it planning around Medicaid eligibility? Is it, I mean, obviously save, but beyond, that one, what can people do?
I wish I had like an easy, clear solution that was applicable to everyone, but there really is no easy, clear solution. And you have to think about it this way. Long-term care didn't exist 3 generations ago, right? You just died. This is a relatively new concept that has come into the like American retirement experience. And, my experience as a professional with long-term care is that it isn't necessarily what it is sold as when you buy it 20 years prior. Premiums can increase, terms can change, and when you actually do need the long-term care, you need to have a person who's an advocate or a financial advisor or a child step in and manage that entire process with the insurance company. And oftentimes you have to get behind the insurance company with a whip and a chair to pay out benefits that are promised by the insurance policies. So long-term care is not the solution it was even 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. A lot of people self-insure, and it's crippling when you see the final long-term care expenses. Even with a long-term care policy, my mother spent the last 15 months of her life in a assisted care facility. She had a long-term care policy. It covered a fraction of the overall cost. So, people think I have long-term care policy, I'm covered. Well, no, you may not be covered. So I wish I had a solution. I really do. I don't. Most financial advisors are willing to have the conversation with you, but a lot of people end up self-insuring.
Yeah, well, I just posted in the chat here. We did this newsletter earlier this year called the Next Level Wealth Challenge. I spoke to Mark for it, but long-term care insurance was part of that. And yeah, it talked about, people have a lot of misconceptions about end-of-life care and who pays for it. And people think Medicaid covers a lot of it. It doesn't. People think Medi-Cal will cover, people think Medicare covers a lot. It doesn't. People think Medicaid covers a lot. It does, but there are pretty strict tests, and you might not get the place you want and not have a lot of options. And then, yeah, people think, well, I bought long-term care insurance 20, 30 years ago. That's going to cover it all. But yeah, those policies have really changed a lot in the last 20, 30 years. Somebody just asked, what do you mean by self-insuring? That's back to step one of save, right? That you are
you're paying out of pocket.
Self-pay.
Yeah, my mom's long-term care was $11,000 a month. The long-term care policy covered $3,100 every month. The other $8,000 had to come out of pocket.
Yeah, the policies now, and I tried to really kind of nail down with an expert for that industry, like, how much does it cover? Is it, and it's cagey. I would say it's more similar to like dental insurance, where it's sort of like there is a max amount per what you need. There is a max total amount that you will get. these policies are not as flexible or as generous as they used to be. One piece of advice that I got was like, if you are in that 3% of people who already have a policy, especially if it's a couple decades old, hang on for dear life.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Mark, one thing you said when we spoke, this was probably late last year, you said not everyone who has one needs it, but you have not met anyone who has one who regrets it. Is that right?
Generally speaking, yeah. And to your point, if you have an old long-term care insurance policy, yeah, generally you say just keep it because it's gotten far more expensive. I think you look at the stats, the majority of companies that used to offer long-term care insurance like went out of business or went bankrupt or merged with other companies because people use long-term care insurance at a much higher rate than most types of insurance. I think I've heard experts say, like, what type of insurance do you get that you want to use, by the way? Like, you don't want any insurance to have come into play, like car insurance, you don't want an accident. Long-term care, we hope we don't have it. But just to your to the greater point about what can you do to plan ahead? I mean, I have clients with solid 8-figure net worth, like over 10 million, who are concerned about the cost of long-term care and think they're going to go broke. Because those costs can spiral out of control. So from a preventative standpoint, I think this goes back to having that conversations. If you have kids, talk to them about this, because as Robin pointed out, you need an advocate there, and you need family members involved. If you don't have kids, talk to friends or other family members who might be able to help you. And then that's where your estate plan comes in, because we talk about what government benefits are available. In California, we have Medi-Cal, the California version of the federal Medicaid program. That can help pay for certain types of long-term care, not all, if you're eligible. And the rules change all the time. There was no asset limit last year. There's a $130,000 asset limit this year. Some assets are exempt, like your house and retirement accounts. Next year, it's changing again. We don't know what those rules will be like when you might need it. And we don't know what facilities will accept it, but we want to make sure you at least understand it. And we want to make sure your estate plan addresses that. And by that, I mean, if you just do a very simple off-the-shelf estate plan, it probably doesn't address these issues. And by that, I mean, if Medi-Cal rules change, and Medi-Cal can pay for a lot of nursing home care costs. It's not perfect, but it's one of the only programs available, but you have to be eligible. And that goes to, if you name your kids as first of all, you need a plan so people can step in and act on your behalf if you can't manage your finances anymore, because you don't want to get scammed. You want to make sure someone can make sure your bills are paid. But what if you're a bit over the limit, but with some nice planning steps, with good financial advisor, a good estate planning attorney advising you, maybe you can transfer money within your family or set up the right kind of trust to protect those assets and become eligible. Mm-hmm. We need to make sure your estate plan anticipates that ahead of time. It needs to address these issues, which is why it's so important to work with advisors who understand this. Like a standard, simple living trust, power of attorney probably doesn't address the need to give your backups, whether it's your kids or whoever it is, the ability to use strategies to protect your assets to get Medi-Cal before you're completely broke, and to anticipate as laws change to give them the flexibility to move money maybe within the family. But you got to give them that authority ahead of time, or they really can't do it, even if there are steps they could take to protect your assets. So it's all the above. And I think it goes back to having those conversations ahead of time. What are your hopes and needs? How can you empower people you trust to help when the time comes? Because often when you need that expensive care, as I'm sure Chris and Robin, you can both attest, you might not be able to make decisions when you actually need that very expensive care. So you have to make sure you have a good estate plan, trust, power of attorney, advance directive to make sure the right people are empowered to help at that time too. And be aware of those rules as they change. There's some powerful programs, but they're not perfect.
Well, that was something the three of us spoke about when we were putting this webinar together and chatting last week, was the importance of having, like, Chris, you called it like the financial wellness team in place. And who should be a part of that team? Who are you drafting?
Well, you always want to have people that you trust, hopefully know and trust. So usually it's going to be family members. If you're an old adult, it's often going to be your children. Can be, your spouse, friends, and then also financial professionals, legal professionals, healthcare professionals. But this stuff is really hard, even for smart people, who have done a lot of research and were dedicated to doing this kind of thing. It can be very difficult. One of the psychiatrists I work with likes to say, never worry alone. So, don't just sit there and kind of stew about all the problems you're having. Go out, get help. And again, you can get help from your kids, but sometimes you may even need professional help. You may need someone like Robin or someone like Mark. Another good resource for people who know, there are people called geriatric care managers, and they can be a really good resource. And it's usually nurses or social workers who are focused in on this area. And I've worked with a few of them, and it's usually not very expensive, and they can be a great resource because they tend to know. They tend to know about the assisted living facilities. They tend to know about the different, government programs. So that can be very helpful. And one other, a couple other tips about having these conversations. One thing that I've, recognized over the years, sometimes you want to say, talk about the consequences of not talking about it. Okay, so if we don't talk about it now, what's going to happen later? Like Mark would say, if we don't talk, anything about probate court, you don't, trust me, you don't want to go there. Right? So you want to talk about things now so you don't have to go to probate court. If you talk to a Robin and don't talk about it now, then you might get in these family conflicts. You might have tax consequences. So, I like to say, the one thing harder than talking about some of these issues is not talking about it. And you can use that as kind of a conversation point. Just say, hey, Dad, if we don't talk about it now, something could happen in the future. You're going to get sick. You're going to be in a hospital bed. Somebody else is going to be making this. You're actually going to have more control. You're going to have more control now, likely, than you're going to have in the future. So the better you can nail some of these things down now, it's actually going to be to your benefit in the future. And you may feel like you're giving up some control now, but actually you're going to gain control down the road.
And Chris, people are asking this in the chat. I think this is a great question. How can you find these geriatric advisors? Is this you Google it, or is this through your insurance, or?
No, you can literally just go on the internet and find them, and they're local. Again, they'll be local people. We use them with my mom. We use them. My sister's had some issues, and you can, and there are also there's some organizations of these kind of caregivers, but literally just Google it. It's possible that your doctor might know one of them, especially if you're working with a geriatric psychiatrist or a geriatrician. They may or may not know, but you can find these people, and obviously you want to vet them too as well, right? And maybe talk to other people who have worked with them.
Well, what does that vetting process look like? Is that like, give me the number of 3 of your references that I can speak to? Is there like a licensing board?
And I think some of them they'll have those references, or they have, they've been background checked, or they can be part of other organizations that have done that vetting. So that's important. But I found most of these people, again, they're nurses. They're really earnest and caring people, and they can be a really great resource.
All right, we're going to go to the Q&A in just a few minutes, but Mark and Robin, I wanted to ask you, what is a question that, oh, hang on, how did I phrase this? I know you can all see my screen in the background, so you can all see I'm referring to my notes here. What is something that your clients frequently ask, and what's something that you're surprised people don't know that you wind up explaining to them a lot? And Mark, we'll start with you. Frequently asked and not asked enough.
Yeah, well, frequently asked is I mean, on the long-term care front is, how do I pay for this? How do I make sure I don't lose everything in covering these costs? I mean, there's other questions about how do I make sure my kids are protected, of course. And I hear that a lot. And I think to Robin's and Chris's points, there's no one size fits all answer there. It depends on your assets, your dreams, your goals, your worries. Is it all about staying at home? And if that's the case, that's a different type of plan and mindset than, hey, I recognize that maybe it's good if I go to a community with other seniors with different levels of care and planning for the costs there. And I think another question that comes up a lot is, how do I make sure there's no fight between my kids, which we kind of talked about at the beginning. I don't want litigation later. And that, again, is about like talking to your kids ahead of time, having a plan. The estate plan governs, like what you say goes. It's not like you name a trustee and they decide how it's distributed. Your trust says how your assets are distributed. So that's making sure you have a plan that's consistent with what you've talked about with your kids. Surprises lead to conflicts. The question I don't hear asked enough is, what should I do with my home equity as I face long-term care? I think we see a lot of mistakes around that. The worst thing for us is when someone comes to us, they're facing really expensive long-term care and they just sold the family home. We're like, I wish you hadn't done that, because it can create a cascade of bad outcomes. Sometimes it is the right choice. Reverse mortgages also in this category. We generally don't like those. So talk to an expert before you think about how to tap home equity with selling or home equity line of credit. Because if you sell your house while you're still around, well, you have potentially a huge capital gains tax bill. If it's in your estate when you pass away, capital gains taxes go away. Your kids can sell with no capital gains tax bill. You may have very low Prop 13 taxes. Prop 19 limits the ability to pass those along to your kids, but at least there's some protections, and we can sometimes plan to keep those low taxes. And the home is exempt when it comes to Medi-Cal eligibility. So, imagine you have a home worth $2 million, $3 million. That doesn't interfere with your ability to get Medi-Cal, even if limits seem very low because the house is exempt no matter what it's worth, at least under current laws. If you sell it, not only might you pay capital gains taxes, but now it went from an exempt asset to a non-exempt asset. So it's much harder to get Medi-Cal. So I think that's
Right. It's
probably
like now instead of having your home that's worth $2 million, you have that 2 million minus capital gains tax in
Yep.
your bank account interfering with your Medi-Cal eligibility. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's where I wish people talk to experts before. You still might end up selling. You still might get that reverse mortgage. Reverse mortgages, by the way, the problem there is if you go to long-term care, clock starts ticking, and eventually you're gonna have to pay back the loan, which forces the sale of the house. So those can be problematic as well. So I think thinking about the home equity in a smart way is probably the thing that we don't get asked enough, but I wish we were more often.
Well, I think you brought up an interesting point there about long-term care as well, which is there are different options. I know a lot of people are like, I want to age at home because I don't want to be like stuck in a nursing home. But I spoke to people for this story, Peg Miller and Ellen Fogarty, who are at the Sequoias, which they clearly really love. And Ellen talked about long before she needed to wanted to move to any of these sort of places. She toured a bunch. And then Peg Miller said the same thing. She said she liked Sequoias because it was a brutalist structure and she taught at a brutalist structure at UVA. That was her decision-making factor, which I loved. But it sounds like it's a good idea to maybe explore what's out there and not just have this idea in your mind of like, these are negative outcomes. I'm going to stay at home because I don't want to explore those at all. Chris, do you think it ever surprises people when they find out what sort of long-term care options are out there?
Yeah, I think they're inevitably surprised by the costs. And then sometimes they think, well, Medicare is going to cover it, or Medicaid is going to cover it, and then, or, their health insurance is going to cover it. I think that's a big surprise. I think it's really important to see those buckets of the healthcare bucket and again, long-term care bucket. Obviously, there's some overlap, but you really need to think about both and plan for both and make sure you understand the costs associated with both. And one thing I was going to say, there's a bunch of places you can go online. You can do like long-term care cost calculators. You can do those often at like the state or regional level. So you could do it for, San Jose in California. So try to, do that a little bit or talk to Robin or someone like Robin who understands those costs. And again, so you almost want to have two line items. You got your healthcare costs and you've got your long-term care costs. So I think that's something that people don't really understand. And the one other point, we kind of alluded to it earlier that I just want to make is that there have been studies that try to estimate when you start to decline in your ability, the average person decline in their ability to make strong financial decisions. And most of these studies say that age is sometime in your early 50s, not 60s, not 70s. So again, it reinforces the need to start doing things early because for most people, already by the time they're in their late 50s, they're not as good about making decisions, financial decisions, especially, but also legal decisions. They're not as good as making those decisions as they were when they were younger. So you don't want to delay things to the point where you're in your 70s and maybe experience some level of cognitive decline. So I think that's something else that people should be aware of is that just your capabilities, as much as we like to think we're still there, we're still all there, but just sort of assume that you're not, kind of assume that you're not, and start that
Right.
planning process
Yeah.
earlier than you think.
Yeah, certainly an important factor to keep in mind. And then Robin, yeah, back to you before we begin our Q&A. Yeah, most frequently asked question and not frequently asked enough question.
One of the most frequently asked questions I get is how to care for a child with either a mental health disorder or an addiction, and how to be fair to the other children. And that's always sticky, and you have to know the family dynamics, and there's a lot of emotion behind that. And there are things that can be designed with estate planners to make provisions for that. But I always thank the client for being honest about their situation and not, they're being transparent with me about a family issue or mental health issue or drug addiction among kids. The question I'm not asked enough is how can I enjoy my own money? Everyone's trying to save for long-term care, which is maybe the last 3 years to 15 months of life, and it's not fun. Spending tens of thousands of dollars a month on long-term care is not fun. And I wish that person would have spent the money in a different way earlier to bring joy to their lives or to help their family or help, you know, um, facilitate connection, to do something that was really meaningful to their life experience. So, one question I wish people would ask me more is how do I enjoy my own money?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I speak a lot to a wealth advisor, yeah, named Mary Clemens Evans, and she says her clients are pretty split between FOMO, fear of missing out, people who want to spend all their money as quickly as possible, and FORO, which is fear of running out. And those are the people she's having to prod to be like, enjoy it, you saved it. And I know it's really hard for people to flip that switch of save, save, save for retirement, and then you get there and it's like, oh, now you get to spend it all. I think that's a really tough mindset shift. We're going to transition to our Q&A with our audience. So we're going to start here. We had a few questions around picking a trustee. If you don't have a family member or friend that you trust to put in that position of trustee or executor, what are your options? Mark, we can go to you for that one.
Yeah, we get that question a lot, especially as a lot of our clients don't have kids, or they have kids and none of them are really great with money, or they want to start a fight between the kids fighting over who gets to be a trustee, although it's a hard job. So if you don't have any family members or very close trusted friends, there are professionals. So banks have trust departments. I kind of roll my eyes a little bit because some of them are good, some of them are not great. Wells Fargo, First Republic used to have one, and then they got subsumed by another bank. There's a few banks locally that do have those. It's very mixed as to how good they are. There are professional fiduciaries. So there are some fiduciary agencies that have like teams of fiduciaries. So a fiduciary is just someone who professionally serves as trustee. They have to be certified. They have to pass a test. The California Professional Fiduciaries Association of California, PFAC, I think it is. They have a website where you can look. Hard to vet them. And then we attorneys occasionally serve as trustee as well. There's probably other categories out there, but it's usually kind of financial institutions like banks, professional fiduciaries or fiduciary agencies, or sometimes attorneys. And it's important to vet them, make sure they have a good background. It's hard though, because the fiduciaries we've known the longest are getting older and they need to be around for a number of years for you. So you talk to the world of professionals.
Yeah, and Robin, I know you specialize in helping people plan for solo retirement. What do you advise people that in this position, and how do you vet those people?
So, especially if they have an issue with mental health in their family or addiction, you never want to pit siblings against each other. You don't want to put sibling as a successor trustee and they're in the, position of having to tell their brother no, who's dealing with addiction issues. This is a surefire shot to completely obliterating the sibling relationship. At that point, getting a third party fiduciary makes sense. Third party fiduciaries, they charge hourly. They charge like lawyers. They are expensive. They can, really rack up. But to save the family dynamic, sometimes you can't have family members or friends doing it. It's also basically a full-time job in its own self, especially if you have assets like homes and everything. You're really asking a friend or a family member to step in and do a lot of work of clearing out your house, selling your house, divvying up the assets. And it's oftentimes beyond the capability of many people. So sometimes just having a third party fiduciary is the correct answer.
And then one point somebody asked about that we brought up earlier, which is that a 20-year-old power of attorney document is not going to be valid. How often do you need to refresh that? And somebody else asked, do you need these documents notarized?
Yeah, go ahead.
I always say the 29th of February. So like every 4 years, you should be at least looking at your estate plan. And it really depends. Like my family lives in Tennessee. We're originally from Louisiana, but we live in Tennessee. I was surprised how loosey-goosey they were about paperwork in Tennessee. Like when my sister went to the hospital, they just took her word for it that she was a daughter and she made all sorts of medical decisions. They never needed to see the power of attorney. California, they have to see the power of attorney, and if the power of attorney is older than a certain amount, of time, they're not going to do it. So part of it does depend on where you live, but I always tell people basically every 4 years you should at least be looking at it. But I'll turn it over to Mark since.
Oh, great. I love the February 29th thing. So we say 3 to 5 years. And so there's two reasons you need to update these. One is that they become stale. So to Robin's point, like especially in California, we have people who they're technically valid powers of attorney. They do need to be notarized. But a bank just doesn't trust a 10 or 15-year-old document. So they'll often call us or say, hey, the bank is asking for an attorney's note, which ends up being more expensive than just doing a new version. So one thing is just refresh every 3 to 5 years, even if you're not changing your choices. But two, your choices might change, right? The people you named in the power of attorney may not make sense anymore. So do you even remember who you had if you did a power of attorney 10, 15 years ago? So many times people come in and the first person named, they're like, oh, that person is seriously ill, or I hate them now, or, I don't trust them anymore. So, or I think adding into the second category of when you should change it, if there's a change in law and you're like, hey, does this affect my estate plan? Do I need to add provisions to my power of attorney or my advance directive or my trust to address this? So I think 3 to 5 years, the February 29th thing, I love that. I might I might borrow that from you, Robin. That's a really good way of looking
And
at it.
I always tell people name backups. Name 1 to 2 backups to because the person who you may want to operate as power of attorney may not have the capacity to do it or may be dead. And if you don't have a backup name, it basically kicks off to the courts. But if you have a backup name, it's pretty clean to get that backup person in and to start operating on your behalf. So for each role, name one, at least one, maybe 2 backups to
Agree.
your primary choice.
Totally agree.
There were a couple questions in here, quite a few about Medi-Cal, and someone said Medi-Cal is not exactly free. I mean, part of it is you have paid into it with your taxes, but then California can pursue asset recovery after your death. Is that right, Mark?
That's right. The biggest thing to know about Medi-Cal recovery, and there's a lot of misnomers about there, is can the state go after your house? Because typically you need to be eligible for Medi-Cal, meaning you don't have assets the state can go after when you pass away, other than your house is the biggest issue. But here's the key tip. If your house is in a living trust, the state cannot go after it. So the state can only make a reimbursement claim if your house is exposed to probate. How do you avoid probate? Have a living trust, make sure it's set up properly. The house should be titled in the living trust. When we help our clients, we set up the living trust. We handle the deed to transfer the house into the trust. We can be sure it's properly in the trust, and that should stop the state from being able to go after it. We talked about it's so unjust that the people who can't afford to see lawyers or don't talk to lawyers end up having their houses seized by the state, which is so backwards, but that's a policy issue, but you can protect it.
I would also
And
say
then
I've come across issues with insurability on houses after death. If the individual who owned the house and was their primary residence is deceased, sometimes the insurance company is like, well, the insurance policy is no longer valid, or it's no longer valid for owner-occupied residency, and it kicks off a whole sequence of events. You should try to list or talk to your insurance company to see what is the best way to go about this. But if the home is in a living trust, you may want to list that as secondary on the policy so that when the primary person dies, the trust automatically has the house covered. A lot of people don't think about insurance, but I have seen that a few times where it's created a lot of problems.
That's a great point. There were a few questions here also about when setting up your estate to be inherited. Someone said, where do we put the details of how we want things to be split up? And then when things are split up, is every beneficiary notified of what every other beneficiary got?
Great. I can feel that because that's what I do every day. So that would be in your living trust. So your living trust is really what directs the majority of your assets now. Retirement accounts and life insurance policies are not in your trust. So your house should be in your trust. Your non-retirement assets should be in your trust. And your trust says you can say be as specific as you want. You can say my house to this child, this account to this child. Usually we just say give shares, 50-50, a third, a third, a third. And your trust will say typically we say just the value of your estate rather than specific assets. It gets very complicated. So if your estate's worth, $3 million, you have 3 kids, a third, a third, a third. Okay, they each get $1 million. It's kind of up to the trustee and the kids to decide who gets what as long as the value adds up. And who gets notified? Well, anyone named in your trust will get a copy of that trust after you pass away. They have the right to see it, to see what their rights are. They have a right to an accounting. So everybody can see it. So this, you and I chatted about this, Jessica, before. If you want to disinherit somebody, don't leave them $1. That's one of the biggest misnomers. You leave them $1, they get a copy of the trust. They have a right as a beneficiary. They're a beneficiary of the estate for $1. Just leave them out. I mean, they still might eventually have a right to challenge things, but everybody who is named in the trust will is entitled to a copy of the trust and an accounting of the estate to make sure that the trustee is doing their job properly. So they get to see it.
All right. Somebody asked a sort of philosophical question, and this is something that came up a lot in my reporting too. If I am in a position to pass down assets to my heirs while I'm still living, should I do that, or should I wait until I'm gone and let it all sort out there? And Robin, what do you advise people when they ask you about that?
Well, something we have to consider is that people are living longer than ever. So if you die at 95, odds are your kid is 65 to 70. That money really doesn't do that person much good at age 65, 70 in many cases. And what happens is the person ends up inheriting, it sits in an investment account for a next generation until they die, and then their kids get it, and it sits in an investment account again. It never gets an opportunity to bring joy or circulate in the economy. I always advocate for clients who I can pretty much tell they're going to die with a substantial amount of money to start gifting money to the next generation. And it has to be done in a very thoughtful and a very considered manner. You know, you don't want to gift an 18-year-old 20,000 bucks or whatever. But, you know, if the child has proven that they're an adult, that they're going to handle money and that they're going to use the money wisely, they shouldn't have to wait until they're 65 to 70 to receive something that can really transform their lives now.
And then a lot of questions, of course, about Prop 19. I know there is that $1 million exemption for the person who takes over ownership. What if your parents own multiple homes? If there's one child, can they claim both as their primary residence? Can two children each claim a home as their primary residence? Mark, what's your take on that?
Only one house is protected. So if you own two houses, even if you're staying in both, you only one house will count as mom and dad's primary residence, and only one house can be protected if the kids moved in. If multiple kids inherit, as long as one child moves in and makes their residence and files the proper paperwork, ideally within a year, there's some leeway there. Then you can still get the $1 million, but it's one property. If you have multiple properties, Prop 19 doesn't protect them at all. Again, working with attorneys, we can sometimes figure out solutions for that, but it takes a lot of work. But don't count on more than one property getting that protection just from the paperwork for Prop 19. And you got to make sure that you're working with the team to properly retitle things. When someone passes away, even if they have a trust, you still typically need an attorney to handle the trust administration to make sure you don't miss things like this. Because if you don't file in time, you might be able to correct it, but you might lose that $1 million protection until you file the paperwork. Whereas if you file it in time, you might not have any issue with that. So one property, and as long as one or more children who inherits it makes it their primary residence.
And then what if, I know in San Francisco especially, it's very popular, homes are actually like divided into flats or multiple sort of apartments. What if you own a multifamily home like that and mom and dad occupy one unit, but the rest are rented out? I mean, is that still protected under Prop 19, or is it really talk to a lawyer about this one?
Yeah, I think talk to a lawyer. It might depend. I believe that would still probably qualify as long as mom and dad were living in a unit and the kids moved in. I want to double check that to make absolutely sure, but I think you'd still do it. As long as you count as your primary residence, you can still rent out part of the house. But talk to a lawyer to make sure. Everyone's situation could be a little bit different.
Okay, someone said if we have long-term care insurance and we're not sure it's going to be enough, or if we no longer qualify for long-term care insurance, what are things we can do right now to prepare to pay? Robin?
Save, invest, and hope. It's like I said, I don't have a solution to that. Odds are, if you have a long-term care policy, it is not going to cover all of your long-term care. It's going to cover a portion of the long-term care. I would take a look at what assets you have coming in, like Social Security, pensions, annuities, anything like that, that you can count on to come in, to see how much monthly income you can reasonably count on, and see if that is within relative striking distance of covering the long-term care. If it's not, it's going to have to come out of a retirement account. It's going to have to come out of a savings account. But sometimes I've had some situations where clients were fortunate enough where they had pensions and Social Security and annuities, and in addition to long-term care that was able to cover the expense of the long-term care when combined all together.
Mhm. You know, a lot of questions we've got here are about which professional do I talk to? Who do I need? It really seems like the sort of the two primary legs here is you need sort of a financial advisor and you need an attorney. I would say, you know, I linked in here, and if I could have Janelle or Sarah link to the Next Level Wealth Challenge newsletter for people to sign up for that. We go into depth in that series about it. But with the financial advisor, you really want to look for somebody who has what's called fiduciary duty. That means they have to make decisions that are in your best interest and not in theirs or their bosses or their shareholders or whoever. People, especially with a CFP or CPA designation, Robin is a CFP, but these are people who have taken tests and are certified to do this sort of thing. So you want to really look for those designations, and again, fiduciary duty. And then with attorneys, yeah, it's going to be an estate planning attorney, which is what Mark does, and many other wonderful qualified lawyers in the Bay Area. And then when I wrote this piece about how do you pick a financial advisor, how do you pick an attorney, it's a lot like vetting any other professional. Check their references, call people, meet with 3 to 5 in each category, and see who you develop a rapport with, because this is someone you're trusting with this really life-changing stuff, and this is someone who's going to help you through some of these really tricky decisions. And so I think it's about meeting with people and feeling like there really is that level of trust and rapport there that you're building early on.
Mhm. It's also, I can't emphasize this enough. These relationships need to be built early, decades in advance, because if I've worked with a client for a decade, A, I know them really well, and B, I will go to the mat for them in a way that I probably wouldn't go to the mat for a client I didn't know well. So, you work with someone you know, like, and trust, and really invest in that relationship, because sometimes it's the financial advisor that's holding it all together.
Okay, we only have a few minutes left. I'll go around to all three of you. You can say if there are any points here or any things. I also want to say I think we have so many wonderful readers who have joined us for this webinar, and so many wonderful people who've written to me with really, really interesting and personal stories. And so thank you to all of you for reading. Sarah, if we could put links to all three stories from the Great Wealth Transfer in the chat so that people can read those if they missed one or want to revisit. And then, yeah, the Next Level Wealth Challenge sign up. But we can start with Chris. What's the one thing you wish more people knew about long-term care planning?
Um, I think, I just saw someone question about, are there some sort of admission criteria for long-term care? And one thing to keep in mind, this happened with my mother. My mother was in independent living, and she actually basically got kicked out of independent living because she started wandering. And one morning I got a call from someone at the independent living facility said, "You got to get your mom out of here. She's not safe." And then also, if you're applying for sort of regular assisted living, they frequently will do some form of cognitive test. So if you don't pass that cognitive test, they won't accept you either. And so then you're going to need to go to memory care. And memory care tends to be 20, 30, 50% more expensive than normal assisted living facilities. So I guess one thing I would say is once cognitive impairment starts to get involved in the equation, it gets more complicated and tends to be much more expensive. So that's something else you need to keep in mind when you're doing this planning. If you have a family history of Alzheimer's or dementia, you really need to put that in the back of your mind. And when you're planning, think about you're going to need a different type of care and a likely more expensive type of care. And unfortunately, there's no cure for Alzheimer's on the horizon. Hopefully, by the time we all get a little older, it'll be there, but it's not there now. So it's not something that's going to be curable in the near future. So that's something you really need to keep in mind. And it's a really important part of the long-term care planning process.
Yeah, that is very true. All right. Mark, what's one more thing for our viewers who are joining us here today? One more thing you wish more people knew about their estate planning?
Yeah, well, I think like not having a plan is a plan, and hope, I like to say this talks like hope is not a strategy. It's from my consulting days, cliche, but it's true. And just hoping that things work out is not a strategy. And there's so much more that we can control than we think. There is a deadline for estate planning. We just don't know when it is. It's when you become incapacitated or pass away. I'm a cancer survivor. When I was 40, I was diagnosed with a sarcoma in my leg. I thought it was just a bump in my leg. It was harmless. Turned out to be originally 50-50 odds I'd even be here today. And happily, I'm fine now. But I've been through it myself. My grandmother had Alzheimer's. My father and I are now, my parents and I are having these talks ourselves. So not having a plan is a choice. So make that choice to have a plan and build that team ahead of time. To Robin's point, to Chris's point, have that team. If you haven't started yet, the best time to start is 5 years ago. The next best time is now, right? Have those conversations. And just to the point about helping your kids while if you're blessed enough to have enough money to help your kids out while you're living, maybe combine those gifts with some family talk. Say, hey, come around for the holidays. I have a gift for you guys, an annual, you can give up to $19,000 a year without reporting it to taxes, but maybe that's an excuse to talk about these issues and make sure you lead with positivity, whether you're the parent or the kids. What do you want? What are your hopes and dreams? So just have that talk, find your team, build that team before you need it if you can.
And then Robin, we'll go to you. What's one more thing you wish people knew about financial planning for the Great Wealth Transfer?
I just kind of wanted to piggyback on what Mark was saying. I always say that when someone dies, the estate should never be a surprise to anyone. Like if you're mentioned in that estate, you should know what was going on. I've had people who didn't know that they were the successor trustee, and all of a sudden, surprise, this person has a pretty significant role in settling out this person's estate. If you are mentioning someone in your estate, your will or your, living trust, that is a conversation. And it's a conversation decades before you die because you have to be of clear mind. You have to be prepared that the person says no. and have backup ready to go. So the sooner you can start this process and the sooner you can clarify everything to everyone and then make it an iterative process of having the conversation again it makes things infinitely easier versus everything being a grand surprise when you die and people don't know anything about anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep it positive. No big surprises. All right, I think that's great advice. Readers, we are going to send a follow-up email with all of these links that we mentioned. You're going to get a link to the recording of this if you'd like to watch it again later. You can also shoot me an email anytime, jessica.roy@sfchronicle.com. I love hearing from you. I try to write back to everybody. I do not always get the chance, but I do my best. Someone said, thank you. This was a bit depressing, but very helpful. That's what I'm really going for with my work. So thank you for that. Unfortunately, reality is a little bit depressing sometimes. Somebody else said, I feel like the great wealth transfer is going to go to care instead of heirs. Olga, that would have been a great headline for this story. Please reach out again if you have any headline ideas for me, because that's a really good one. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. We're so glad to have you here, and thanks for being a Chronicle subscriber.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.